Welcome to Agencyphonics. It's episode 42 today. I had to look down there and double check. And welcome everybody. Today I've got Ritchie-Tomkins from SQN, which stands for Sine Qua Non, and which I can never really pronounce that well. Thank you for making your agency name really complicated. But before we move on to Claire, I just want to say a few quick thank yous, as always. Thanks to Caitlin and to Abby and to everyone at Cactus who helped make all these episodes happen. A lot of time and effort goes on behind the scenes to try and to create this show. And a massive thank you to everyone at Forecast. Forecast is the project management tool that most of my clients I work with now, most of my friends who run agencies have started to use in the past 12 months. It's an excellent piece of software for running your project management in your agency. And I'm plugging them loads because they kindly sponsor our show. We run Agencyphonics, the podcast, and we run our community Agencynomics as a not-for-profit. It's our way of paying it forward to support the now, next, and future generation of agencies, and it can't happen without people like Forecast supporting us and being friends of all of us, and so we're eternally grateful to them. So as you can see, my hair is getting remarkably long. We are now in. I kind of work it out now, but it feels like it's been 3 months since I've been allowed to have a haircut. But yeah, every single Premiership footballer seems to have the best haircuts in the world right now. So I don't know how come their hairdressers are allowed to go and cut their hair, but we're not allowed to get our hairs cut. So yeah, we'll get a bit long and curly and wavy. Last time I had a baseball cap to hide it, but I thought I'd just, avoid the baseball cap this time round. So so welcome Claire to the show. And I guess I wanted to just really start by getting a little bit of background about how you've got into agency life. I know you started life in the corporate world.
Yeah.
Yeah, give us a little bit about your background and how you got started.
Yeah, so Spencer, I started my life out at HP, actually, in the IT industry. So I did 5 years at HP. I then moved to Nortel, so telecommunications, and did all sorts of corporate in-house marketing roles, as you do, channel marketing, product marketing, brand. And then one of my latter roles at Nortel, I was asked to be global sponsorship manager, looking after Nortel sponsorship with Williams in Formula One, and BT Global Challenge sailing. And that gave me a taste of sponsorship. I thought, if I'm going to have a long-term career in Nortel, I better go back into what I called a real job. So I went into a sales job, absolutely hated it, having spent 2 or 3 years out and about doing things in a more exciting environment, and thought actually Nortel downsized and I had the opportunity to leave. And I thought I'll give myself 6 months and have a go at running an agency. And I guess I thought that the vision was that I could do a better job of managing an agency than my agencies were doing for themselves. So that was always the sort of premise on which I set up, just to give it a go. And if it didn't work, it didn't work, and I just get another job.
Yes.
And going back 20 years later.
Going back to the work that you did with the Formula One and with the sailing, and I know when I had my agency, like you, we had quite a big sport. I mean, you're very focused on sport technology, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But
yeah,
I used to sponsor the Subaru World Rally team. I know you also work a lot in rally now as well, World Rally, WRC, and I'm just curious to know what you were working, and that always strikes me as a fun but kind of brutal life of being on the circuit. I mean, obviously you were doing Formula One, which is even probably slightly more high profile, but also you probably got to see much closer, I guess, how the sponsorship was activated, how it worked, etc. But what was it like? It always looks quite glamorous, but was it that glamorous, or was it quite hard, or how was it?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember at North, we had 100,000 employees at the time when I was offered the job, and so many people came along that wanted to do the job because they were interested in Formula One, whereas actually managing a multi-million-dollar sponsorship takes quite a lot of different skills and multiple skill set. And you're managing events, you're managing campaigns, you're doing PR stunts, all those sort of marketing aspects. And I think it everybody used to think I was just wandered around drinking champagne, and nothing could have been further from the truth. I always think about,
and drink champagne. That's how I always imagine it to be like.
Yeah, but it's like, I remember the night we had, I guess, 25 of Nortel's top global customers at Monaco for the Grand Prix with their wives. So it was a spouse program as well. And we had Prince Michael of Kent on a yacht for dinner. And, we were trying to get him back to his hotel. He was having a great time talking to the guests, didn't want to leave. And, eventually we did our debrief at 2:00 in the morning, sat in the hotel lobby, ready to get up at 6:00 in the morning to start all over again. So, weekends were pretty tough. And being able to cat nap for 20 minutes at the end of a day, or sort of like 5:00 in order to go out to the evening event and evening thing, then, you just start to be able to adapt, and you just got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. But the insight and learning from actually being very much part of that scene must really, really help today a lot as well. That experience of being in there when it comes to sponsorship. And I think this is a really great episode for me. I'm really looking forward to talking to you more later on about this, because in two areas. One, we don't talk to a lot of sponsorship type agencies, or we have so far on the show. So it'd be good to understand more about the services you provide around there and how that works, get insight into it. But also I'd love to chat to you more about the discovery that I had being new to sponsorship, when we actually, as an agency, we created a sponsorship program sponsored 2 sports brands, and the learnings around activation and that stuff. So I'd love to pick your brains on that and talk to you more about showing how agencies also could get more out of doing maybe sponsorship. So when you got started, how did you start the business? So you had this vision of doing it better than your existing agencies were. What did you do? What were the first steps? Did you have a client?
No. So no client. Luckily, fortunately, I had a package because I've been at Nortel for 10 years. So I had some financial backing from that perspective as a safety net. But actually, we weren't our first client in our first month. So it was me as a one-man band starting out. That ended up being actually some consulting work, which actually wasn't sponsorship related. So, one of the things, I guess, when you start a business, you look at what capabilities you have and what you can deliver yourself. And having been in the IT industry for that long, obviously I had some capabilities around marketing and the tech space. And first project we did actually was around systems integration and the systems integration market in the UK. But, that actually, I guess, gave me a lot of confidence, because to win your first deal in your first month, I went in thinking it was going to be a long, protracted process. And I went in and had this conversation with this guy. It was at 186K in the sort of old days. And he said, clearly you can do the job. How much is it going to cost me? And I said, well, if you give me a month's work, I'll discount it by 20%. He said, done. Shook my hand and I walked out the room. And I was like, I sat in the car completely shocked. I guess that gave me the sort of belief, I guess, that I could actually do this. And then it started rolling. And then we started working with Amation, who was sponsor of Jordan Grand Prix at the time, and then sort of moved more, I guess, into the sponsorship space, which is really where we wanted to be.
So just going back there, you said to the guy, if you sign it off today, I'll give you 20% off. Is that what you said?
I said, this is my day rate. This is always a hard thing. I think when you start an agent, you've been in corporate life 15 years, you've had a salary coming in, and all of a sudden you've got to go out and say, this is my day rate. And, that's quite a challenge in the first place. So I said, this is my day rate. And I said, but if you give me a month's work, I'll give you 20% discount.
Right. Okay. But I love that, because there's a salesperson in you that's a good closer, clearly, because you're finding a way to close the deal off. And it's funny, it's been a big topic this week, actually, that I've had with a few agency owners who've got lots of things in the pipeline, trying to close things off and trying to come up with some ideas on how they can incentivize. It's not always discounting, but it's like, how can you incentivize to get something in sooner? So just interesting hearing you say that. That was all. So so you got Amation, which is, again, a pretty big brand to get for your first proper client or your second client. So,
yeah, and I guess that was.
Did you have good relationships? Did you have a connection with those people there, or
that was through an introduction with somebody that's actually been a complete godsend, I guess, to the business over a number of years. one of my connections through F1 who obviously saw value in what we could deliver, and understood that, and actually was a sounding board when I was thinking about setting up the business. I went and passed it by him. He was the marketing director at Jordan at the time, and he knew that we could help this particular brand, Imation. They'd been a sponsor. They were looking at how they could do things better, how they could change it up a bit, and we helped them with that.
Amazing. So good old power of the network, hey?
Yeah. And you know, that is so important. I know you talk about it so much in Agencynomics in the book, and it has. I mean, you know, relationships are everything. And I guess I've been fortunate that I've been able to develop relationships over many, many years in my corporate life, and obviously in growing the business and the agency.
Yeah, and I think it's really nice you saying that, because I think there's a lot of people now that set agencies up. I come across them quite often, and they may be, in their early 20s, and they haven't really had a chance to build a big network. I mean, to be fair, a lot of youngsters now, have big networks, big social networks from a very young age anyway, to a certain degree. I mean, they're probably much better. Like, I remember when I started my business, Claire, I had 22 contacts in my Outlook database, right? But I still had 10, 12 years of work, and people I'd met, people I knew. And B2B selling is often quite a long game. Sometimes it is relationships over a long period of time that create stuff. So when you look back at the journey you've been on, I guess that is there any sort of pearls of wisdom around that, around the kind of, building the networks over a long period of time?
I would say that, never shoot yourself in the foot, because you don't know when that person's going to reappear somewhere. So always try and maintain relationships. Absolutely. But, I guess I've always treated the CEO the same as the cleaner. And that's been a way that I was brought up. And I think that has actually helped me a lot. And, I guess a lot of people get starstruck or, nervous about people's seniority, and at the end of the day, I've always treated them as people, and I think that's gone a long way.
I read an article this morning that actually said you can tell someone, you can judge someone by these 5 key things, and one of them was how they treat the people that can't help them in life, and they cite the example there of a cleaner or someone in a supermarket, and that so that shows that you're a nice person already. That's good. So yes, it's good, and I like the fact that you've had to, you've built these relationships up over a long period of time, and I'm guessing the person that helps you with the Imation deal has probably done that time and time again. I guess as over the years has probably kept on referring you, recommending you, right?
Absolutely, Mark. Sorry, Spencer. And Mark has been absolutely great for us as a business, and we're just about to do some other work with him, and it works both ways. We bring him into opportunities that he's now a public speaker. And so when we've got events where we need to have somebody that's got his type of skills and experience, then, more than happy to bring him in and recommend him as well. So
sounds like we should get him into our community to talk about some of that stuff around sports. I quite like to get more sporting related storytelling going in there, actually, because I think there's always a lot of good business lessons from it. So you won a couple of clients, and then you started to grow the business up. And I guess where did you sort of focus? Because obviously you talk a lot about sponsorship. I know you don't just do sponsorship today. You've got a slightly wider service line now, haven't you?
Yeah, well, I guess the thing about sponsorship is that that's sort of like the ticket to the party, if you like. So, and I think a lot of people think about sponsorship as advertising. And if people think that, then it's completely wrong, and it's lost, because sponsorship is so much more than advertising. There's advertising is putting your name on a billboard. Sponsorship is actually getting some emotional engagement with the audience, which you don't get really from a billboard or whatever it is, the side of a bus. And there are so many more facets to sponsorship. And in order to actually make sponsorship work and to leverage it and to get the return on investment, you need to be executing against all parts of the marketing mix. And that's how you bring it into being. And as a business, I guess we realize that some people just do sponsorship deals, and there are agents out there that will just do a deal and then walk away from it. Whereas I guess we see executing against that deal is also part of the excitement for us, and seeing it come to life. And so that is, events, hospitality, it's PR, it's communications, it's content, social media, it's the whole piece. And, sponsorship is effectively the glue that holds it together. So I guess the vision was always that we needed to be able to deliver on that side of it as well. So having a service business that supports sponsorship, but that can actually also be a business in its own right, effectively. So we can do communications as standalone outside of a sponsorship or within a sponsorship. And in 2005, we had the opportunity to buy a small tech PR agency, which we did. Just a one-man band, but they had some interesting clients that we were then able to take on board and continue to work.
Someone to buy, or did this just sort of present itself as an opportunity for you? Did you actually say, right, we want to buy someone in the space to expand our services, or did it not kind of happen that way? Did it just kind of fall in front of you?
It actually happened. The way it happened was that we'd actually taken an office, and the day that our first employee was due to start working with us, she didn't show up. All of a sudden I had this office space and no employee, and she was coming from Italy, and she just decided not to come. So all of a sudden I'm with this office space, and the guy who was running the tech PR agency was a one-man band working from home, had young kids, and decided that he wanted space. So we worked out of the office together, and then he got headhunted by one of his clients and was just going to walk away from the agency. We saw value in the clients that he had, and a lot of them were in the tech space, obviously. So we decided to invest in that agency and pick up those clients, and then build the content creation side of the business as well.
Okay.
And then I was going to say that's been a godsend in the last year, obviously, being able to, because sponsorship sales and hospitality and sports events have been really hit by COVID. But the digital side of the business that we've built up over the last, 15 years has really sort of come into its own and has, flourished.
So lots of things for me to dig into there. First of all, I think actually we must acknowledge that really, that, I've been doing a lot of surveys around how agencies have been affected by COVID, and because technology sits at the heart of so many agency businesses these days, and technology, has been really growing quite, I like to use the word exponentially, but it has been getting real momentum. I mean, I refer to this a lot, that, McKinsey said that COVID had actually had evolved business transformation by 7 years, and so people are turning to technology to improve their products and services. So a lot of agencies, whether you're marketing and use technology, or you're a design and build business and use technology, they've all grown very, very quickly. But the events side, or live event side of agencies were, and obviously the key sectors that got affected, like high street retail or travel and tourism. But for you guys, you're probably one of the few agencies that I know that really, I mean, I know quite a few of experiential agencies who got hit quite badly as well, but you definitely, being in live sport, and nearly all of live sport being cancelled. Must have been quite a tough year for you. And as you say, you did have other services, but it must be quite frustrating as well, not seeing all this missed potential as well.
Yeah, I guess it depends how you look at it, Spencer, isn't it? Because it was, I think the thing about it now is that going into this season, people have got the experience of last season. So, if Australia Grand Prix isn't going to happen, then they could put something else in its place. Whereas last year we were just like into it, and it was like 3 days before the Australia. In fact, they were all in Australia for the Grand Prix, and then it got cancelled. And so I guess it was the sort of lack of visibility last year that impacted things, and people sort of not really knowing what was going to happen. And our advice to our clients was, you still need to be visible, and you still need to keep your profile up. And even if you're not actually on live event, we need to keep the content fresh. We need to keep the content coming. And fortunately, we have quite a lot of long-term relationships, relationships of 10, 12 years with some of our clients. And they took that advice and followed that. And fortunately, they have ridden that through and with our support.
Yeah. And do you think that the live sort of events around sports will ever be the same again? Do you think what happened last year will maybe accelerate approaches and ways that it's that whole area now works? Will it have created new approaches, maybe new streamlining? I don't know. Are there changes basically?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, certainly virtual events obviously took off relatively quickly, and esports, which I think we might touch on a bit later as well.
Yeah,
but certainly I don't see events going back to being purely the way they were ever again. I think there will always be a hybrid option. I think that, events are limited anyway. You've only got a certain capacity. If you can create something that gives people an extra experience, that you can then share that maybe more globally, or however it is that clients can come from a different place in the world, but virtually, then that's probably worthwhile. And I think that will continue. And we're certainly looking at revenue streams to complement live events with virtual events that are actually a profit center for properties and teams and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that there will be just generally so many more just in the standard event world, so many more improvements now. I think, for us, for example, when we ran our events for many years, they were a bit the same. You had to be there in real person. We wouldn't stream it live as well. And, that because we wanted that real life experience. But I think, the doing a hybrid thing now will become easier. And I think also trying to reinvent events that maybe are more local, involve less travel as well in some cases. So I think, there are lots of different ways to enhance experience. So I think as much as it's been impacted terribly, I feel like it will help it modernize, progress. And as human beings, right, we love experience. We're only really here, aren't we, for experiences?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and events are part of, learning and experiencing things, entertainment. And so it's important. Claire, what I wanted to talk to you about was my own experience with sponsorship in our agency, and just pick your brains on it a little bit and maybe share it with others, because I do think it's an interesting area for agency, owners, founders, and people working in leadership teams to also bear in mind. I sort of cast my mind back now to being in a meeting room that I had at Blue Halo, where we suddenly decided that it was about time we understood who our target client was, but more importantly, what their persona was, and what could we learn more about them as an individual. And we're a design and build agency, so we weren't so marketing focused. So doing persona work wasn't as maybe obvious. Although we do know most agencies that do marketing are terrible at doing their own marketing and therefore their own persona work. But back in the mid 2000s, it was early days of the internet. It was fast growing. And most companies would probably pick the youngest person in the marketing team and make them head of digital, because they couldn't really, there was no one to recruit. It was, you understand what a computer does, right? You're head of digital. And so we drew this persona up, and we had this persona of a 25-year-old to a 35-year-old person who was working within a marketing team, and their job often was to head up e-commerce or head up digital or head up some of the kind of, we now use the word transformation, but head up some of the products they would develop to improve client experience. And we started to look at them closely, and what we realized was that they all had certain things in common, certain traits. And one of them was they all were into motorsport. Now, I think a lot of techies, generally, my experience, I always had lots of engineers work for me, are very much into motorsport. I think a lot of salespeople are into motorsport as well. And so all of the clients tended to like motorsport. They also liked either football or rugby. And we had one client who was, let's say, our oldest, maturest client, which was the big £100 million business. And he was a golfer. He was the only one that was a golfer. But we looked at, what car they drove, how old they were, where they go on holiday, what kind of things seemed important to them. And the sport kind of rang true with us. And so we had an opportunity early on to, we found ourselves one day winning I worked with a non-league football club, Newbury Town FC, and they were sponsored by Vodafone. So they were the only team outside. Vodafone could only sponsor 2 teams. I think it's one Premiership and then one non-league, and they sponsored Newbury. So it was like, they looked quite good, the work we did, because it had Vodafone's logo over it, and we were quite small at the time. But we had an opportunity to win to pitch for Man City and then Tottenham Hotspur. We won Tottenham Hotspur, and so we got our flagship client. But soon after, I had a chance to pitch for the Subaru World Rally team. So I know you work with, which rally team do you work with now?
Hyundai.
Right, so a little bit competitive there. But I got this opportunity to work for them, and what I realized was I had this like a little epiphany, which was I remembered that my target client was all into motorsport. I had an opportunity to work with a motorsport client. How could I bring the two together? Yeah. And there's a reason I'm spelling this story out, because I want agency owners to think like this as well. And then when we did the deal with the Subaru World Racing, what I realized was that they had some things that were magical. So they had the ability to offer sponsorship where people could sit pit side, they could meet the drivers, they could go and experience rallies all around the world. If the sponsors, they could go on drive days that they had at their facility up in the Midlands, where they would do like corporate driving events. And all of a sudden I saw this package of benefits that a sponsor could get. And so we ended up taking some of our marketing budget and conjuring some of our services to do a bit of a value exchange. So we got paid, but we then conjured a bit and said, look, if we can, we'll give you some money off, but if you could give us some sponsorship. And what I learned was that although we were very excited at the beginning of just getting our name on the side of the car, right? For us, like if you go and buy a Subaru World Rally Impreza car, remote control car now, you will see the Blue Halo name on the side of the car still. Right? It's like, I've got one in my study. I'm still really proud of the fact that our name was on there. But what I didn't realize was that whilst the sponsorship gave us access to pit side, to these things, that wasn't that it was the activation of sponsorship. So, you pay for the sponsorship, but if you don't activate it, if you don't have to spend more money to make it really work for you. But if you do that, what was great all of a sudden was, and I haven't really ever shared the story before, but when we won our biggest ever client, the story behind winning it was £1 million a year client that came in at one point. And the story was this. The UK marketing director was speaking to a Canadian colleague who was into the rally in Canada. And he said to her, hey, you should check out these guys, Blue Halo. They do the Subaru World Rally team. Their name's at the bottom of the website. She said, I'd heard of them before because we were in a league table. And actually the sponsorship had worked and won us a new piece of business. But more importantly, all of our existing clients who were or people who we were talking to that were into motorsport, they were more drawn to us because we had our corporate event days, like we had our events inside the museum at Pro Drive. And here's the added bonus, Claire. We then went on and won. We worked with the other sponsors of the Subaru. So we got to meet all the other sponsors and we won all the business through them. So sponsorship as a service that you provide, I mean, I'm guessing they're all you're helping on one hand, you've got to work with the actual people who are offering the sponsorship, right? And the other hand, you've got to find the brands that need it. But it's actually a really magical, powerful thing. I sound like I've just discovered something new, but it's like, but I think not enough agencies think about it for their own marketing, but I also underestimate the amount of investment. Sometimes you've got to make it activating a sponsorship. Is that right? I mean, what I've said, what am I missing all that, by the way? Is there anything else you'd add or?
No, I mean, I think it's absolutely right. And you are spot on that, a lot of people think, oh, I can invest in a sponsorship and then that's done. But, we would recommend between 1 and 3 times the amount that you pay on the rights fee for activation. Right. There's just no point in just putting a sticker on something and not doing anything with it. So it's about how you leverage it. It's about how you integrate it. It's about how I guess what we see is, most of our clients have issues and challenges around revenue, relationships or reputation. And sponsorship plays really nicely into that because it sort of allows you to adopt all three in any sort of activation. If somebody's really keen on revenue, then you look at the extended sales ecosystem that you can sell into through the sponsorship. So it could be, like you just said with Subaru, you could be selling to Subaru themselves, but you're selling to all their other partners. You're selling in an F1 environment. Sorry, say that again?
It really worked.
Yeah.
Because we were there with them at every event. We then became friends with them, and then So yeah.
No, I was going to say, I remember hearing a story of, particularly things like the F1 paddock, where you've got really, lots and lots of global brands, and the opportunities for executives from those global brands to meet with other executives within a race weekend. And I once heard a story that Philips, the CEO of Philips, I think, did more business in one weekend than one of his sales guys had done in the rest of the year, because he was able to, I think the example was, sell TVs or hairdryers or a combination of whatever to the Hilton group. And, imagine that deal being done in a F1 paddock somewhere, and those sorts of extended opportunities to sell, of course, there all the time. And then you can integrate sponsorship assets into your own business, things in like ABM and account-based marketing, revenue marketing. How do you bring those assets in to differentiate your ABM programs and give you something that somebody else doesn't have? So there's a whole side of it there on revenue. On the relationships, you're trying to build relationships with customers, with the media, with clients, with employees. It gives you a whole bunch of assets that you can use and exploit in that way. And then reputation, obviously very brand driven, but so many activations around the brand itself and raising the profile of the brand.
Yeah, the ABM, the account-based marketing, is a very big area, especially in the technology world. Like technology sales teams, a lot of them use account-based marketing, the methodology around new business, and I can see that actually what you do is, by helping them integrate sponsorship into that methodology, you help that experience. So when they're selling, you're able to then take the client persona in, and then obviously host the events, like I said, able to get them out more to the people by people side of things, because you can bring them out to events where you can meet people in real life and decision makers. And I love the Philips story, especially because I could see that weirdly, with us, we got to meet other decision makers away from the office, sharing a common interest, learning to sort of, you're trusted because you're both partnering of the same, you're obviously there because you're, you have shared values in some ways as well. And where else do you get to, meet senior level execs for several hours at a time, without trying to get on a phone and try and get through to them, which is often very difficult,
I mean, you imagine walking down an F1 paddock now, and you especially if you're a tech brand and you look at all the tech brands that are in there, and just thinking about we're talking about technology and how the technology industry has not fared too badly during COVID, and you've got Cognizant coming out as a title sponsor of the new Aston Martin team, and other tech brands joining that team as well. And I think it is certainly an environment that is really conducive to business.
Yeah, and I mean, and obviously that's probably more the premium end, let's say Formula One, Subaru maybe a little bit lower down the budget end, but in practical terms, I mean, I often come across people saying, "Oh, I've been told I can get a speaking event if I sponsor this event. They'll give me a speaking slot." Sorry, and often what will happen is they'll sponsor it, they'll get the speaking slot, and everyone in the audience is going, "Oh, you're only talking because you're a sponsor," and maybe the results aren't as effective. But often it's thinking about how do they activate that sponsorship more than just the speaking event. What else can they do to actually get to meet other sponsors? And I think what I'm trying to say here is that it doesn't always have to be a very premium thing. You can be more tenacious and find smaller opportunities. And one story that springs to mind, Claire, as well, is I had a client once that worked in the luxury space, and I told them about the persona work, and they did it on their clients. I've actually had a couple of funny times where once they came back, said, all our clients are into Glastonbury. So I was like, well, you know what you need to do, right? It's like they all go to Glastonbury, which is, I think it was like the hair and beauty, that kind of world. And then the luxury world, they all play tennis. So, of course, the natural thing there was to suggest, look, why don't you go to someone like Queen's and say to them, look, we've got a lot of clients who are marketing managers. They've all got budget. They all love tennis. You know, what we'd like to maybe do some work for you, and as a bit of a fame project, on some kind of contract basis. Maybe they have a project and there's some kind of offset. Or we'll bring our clients to your location if you give us it for events, because of course when you run an event at Queen's and your target audience into tennis, of course they're all going to turn up.
Yeah.
And then of course the you give the Queen's marketing sponsorship manager a chance to talk. They get access to those. So there's a quid pro quo. It's there's a win-win for everyone involved in those situations. And then the photography, then it creates it demonstrates your culture and the partnerships you have. So I think agencies have got to think more like that themselves.
Yeah.
But the point you make about the 3 times activation, when we sponsored Super, I remember, Claire, that we suddenly realized that we were going to take some people to, I think it was the Sardinian rally, and suddenly we had to pay for everyone's flights, hotels. So we were like, oh, we didn't really plan for this sort of stuff. Oh, we get free tickets at the rally, but no, you have to think about everything else. But I won actually one of my biggest deals, another one of my biggest deals because of the sponsorship, because we actually took a prospect to one of the rallies. Now we did that to help them, by the way, because they also sold sponsorship. So we took them along so they could meet other people, other brands, other companies, and on the back of it, we spent a lot of quality time together, talked more about what it'd be like working together. And so there were so many benefits, but I don't see enough agencies maybe looking at this as a way to win business. So I'm really pleased that we'll cover this area off a little bit today. So with the ABM side of things, obviously what I said to you about the observation, in America, I see a lot of American account-based marketing agencies. Is it as popular here at the moment? Is it gaining in popularity, or have I not aware of it?
No, I mean, I think there's, in some ways it's funny, because I think, having come out of the IT industry, we've been doing account-based marketing for probably the last 20 or 30 years, but it just wasn't called account-based marketing. It's not new, it's just got a new name, but everybody is investing in it. And I think, that getting to know your customers better, differentiating yourselves is getting to be so critical. And going back to the point you were making just now about the photography around Subaru and so on and so forth, it's about content, and it's about telling the story, and it's about how do you create that content and keep it engaging and have different angles on it, and that it's about telling the story in a different way, and finding different hooks. But our sort of way of working with any sponsor in an activation is to come up with a message architecture. You come up with an overriding theme, and then you would build campaigns and stories underneath that and hang off it. And during the course of a year, you may write, I don't know, 3-4 decent storylines, but you're using all that content through social media, through Instagram, through all your other channels, and it's constantly keeping you visible. And it's also giving something that's a bit more engaging, maybe a little bit more human to your potential clients and existing clients about, your product set or your solutions, or even just you as a company. And I just think it's funny because more interesting.
Because the point you make is sounds in many ways is really obvious, but actually weirdly with us, like, we had access to all the design assets of Subaru as part of the deal, so we could leverage everything. But if you bear in mind, this was like 2007-8, before really social media had exploded in the way it had. So there was, funny enough, if you actually type in Blue Halo now on Google and hit Google Images, you will see the picture of the car still now 14 years later. So that's how sticky it's been. But, wow, if I had that sponsorship today and that content, everything you just said would be, I would have so many more assets, because it is difficult to continually create fresh content. But if you've got that partnership, wow, you could leverage it I can now see actually today how much more I could have done with it. You know, and you've probably seen that as well over the years, how now there's so much more you can do. Because before, what would you do? A few brochures, but now you're online. You can stick it onto 14 different social media channels, and you know.
Yeah, I mean, we would always use it through PR and communications. I mean, I remember doing an interview with Alex Zanardi in Canada at the Canadian Grand Prix. So you'd be looking at different sort of platforms and channels to get messages out then, and in the same way as you would now. You just got a lot more channels to choose from. But you know, I guess the other thing, just talking about that, is about this whole thing with telling the story, and we've been doing quite a lot of work on the ROI of sponsorship, because I think that's one of the biggest hurdles for people investing in sponsorship is, you know, how do you really measure it? And so we've been looking at what is the real impact on the business. So, you know, it used to be that sponsorship was measured in ad value equivalent, which, yeah, you know, that's okay. That's visibility, but there are so many more aspects of sponsorship, as we've just discussed. And I think if you've got a technology brand, particularly, because that's obviously where we specialize, but you can tell a story around their technology being used, and you create it as a live showcase, and, you know, you can bring people to events and show how that technology is being used. It has such a massive impact on new business, and also obviously on existing customers, and increasing your footprint into existing customers. But, you know, we've got a correlation between that story and how that can impact the lifetime value of a customer for a brand over many years. And, you know, that the ROI of that is significantly different to ad value equivalent.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? I mean, I think I was definitely naive to think that, you know, a sponsorship is almost like, oh, well, you get your brand name everywhere and that will bring you sales in, but it doesn't. And it, you know, and I think,
but you're not unusual in that, Spencer, though, because I think that's what a lot of people think about sponsorship. They've got no sort of link. They can't link the sort of the brand piece with the actual impact on the business. And I think, and even other agencies out there that have been around for a long time have not really perhaps got the story quite as strong as it needs to be.
Yeah, I think it's the people who make mistakes and learn from those errors. You know, like you do the sponsorship, you think you sponsor an event, you think it's going to bring you loads of business. You don't win anything, and then you go, well, that didn't work. And some people just go, well, I'm never going to do that again. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
But actually, if you sit there and try and reflect and ask other people, how did they make it work? And they say, oh, and I remember someone saying to me, you know, it's all about the activation. And I go, what does that mean? And then they explained, and then I said, okay, well, let me try some of those things. And actually, it's, yeah, I think it's you know, I've worked on quite a few awards events for the industry where they might create a series of awards and then try and sell sponsorship. And of course, all the people will put the money in to sponsor the awards event. And then they're like, well, I didn't win any business, so I'm not going to do it next year. And you're like, oh, hang on a minute. You could have had dinners with all the winners of the awards. You could have created loads more content. You could have, and actually, I think once you realize that, then it's, but I love the fact that you've looked at the ROI. And is there a fixed ROI, or do you have a kind of a model to try and work it out depending on what they're doing?
Yeah, it's a model depending on what they're doing, and every brand's going to be different. But I think it's about the value that you get from sponsorship, and that's misunderstood normally, generally, by, you know, so many. And I guess some of my peers from Nortel are now CMOs, and we have these conversations, and it's, you know, and it's been great because they've been able to give me really good feedback about, you know, if you go in and try and sell a sponsorship, you know, they switch off. Because it's like, oh, that doesn't work, or that's just a big ticket item, and how am I going to justify the investment and show the return when I can show it in digital really easily? And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. Yeah. But, you know, it is absolutely true that you can definitely articulate the value of sponsorship and demonstrate return.
The proof in what you're saying is that in relation to the agency world, which will be the same for probably most service businesses, is that clients, it isn't all, you know, the clients want two things. They want outcomes and they want experience. And yeah, digital marketing will give them the outcome that they want, but it may not give them a personal experience. Yeah. It might not give them a life experience. It might not in any way contribute towards a lifetime value experience. And I think, you know, if, for example, I observed this once where a client of mine sponsored the UK Olympics when it came in. They did a small piece of sponsorship, got some seats in return, and I think they paid quite a lot of money for that sponsorship. But the clients that they took to the Olympics, for team building exercises, not bribery act stuff, none of that rubbish, just general relationship stuff. Those people will never forget the company that took them to the Olympics. And that relationship will be strong forever because we as humans we remember memorable experiences. Like we don't get many of them in our lives. So if we can create memorable experiences through sponsorship in some shape or form, then the value is going to be, as I said, the longevity is going to be brilliant. And I do share this story quite a lot and have done recently, where I had a phone call not long ago from a client, from a friend who very successful agency owner. And he said, we've done the best performing campaign we've ever done, and the client's just left us. And I don't understand why. And I said, he said, I think it's because the experience of working with us. And I was trying to, explain, the client was based in New York, and I'm sure some of the agencies out there sponsor the basketball or sponsor stuff that makes that client experience good, but also not just that. I mean, entering awards, making them look good in their job, helping them learn new things, building better network connections, and sponsorship bring all of those things in from the experience perspective. And so it does it in agency world. It certainly does it in the tech world. It certainly does it in other areas. So I'm sold. I'm sold on sponsorship, definitely.
We sign you up.
Yeah, so maybe I can get a little SQN badge and help you start helping you sell it. So I wanted to touch on esports because one of the things that I've sort of seen over the last 5-6 years, and it's been a very slow burn in many ways, but the sort of the uprising of the e-gaming events. So seeing gamers going to big live events, competing, recognizing that Premiership football clubs have been signing professional, esports players playing football. Football clubs actually, having their own signing professional gamers to be players for them. And obviously Formula One switched on to virtual racing last year as well. So your world feels like it's got an element of that integration happening. Can you tell us a bit about that, and how long do you think it will take before we see much more of it in our everyday lives, do you think?
I mean, I guess if you just look at COVID in the last year and you say, things like sim racing, particularly, I guess, because we're sort of motorsport focused, has really taken off. I mean, I think it was on its way anyway. I think gaming, I remember, we were working for a brand, a memory brand about 5 years ago. And they said, oh, we've done a deal with ninjas in pajamas. And I looked at them, ninjas in pajamas. And, I guess, that was the start of big tournaments and people going to watch people gaming, and first person shooter games and the sort of the big names that we're all familiar with. But I guess in a motorsport world or in a football world, it gives people the opportunity to start playing a game perhaps in a way that they couldn't afford to be involved in the real sport, or they're not selected, for example, in football. But, sim racing, you can get a sim rig and you can get a game and you can start playing. And, you got Brendan, who won the first Formula One esports event several years back, signed by teams and gone to Ferrari now. And you've got MotoGP sim racing coming along, and WRC and World Endurance, and it's really starting to take off. And I think that COVID has just brought that forward. I think it was happening anyway, it's just accelerated it. I guess the big question is whether that's going to maintain that sort of level and grow, and I think it will. I think more and more people will get into it, and the potential for the market is quite significant.
Yeah, and like having, live concerts appearing within Fortnite and other games, and almost bring live experience into the virtual worlds as well. That seems to be something that, is also a massive marketing opportunity. So I guess it adds, at the end of the day, it would just add to the to the main experience will just expand, right? It just basically makes it a richer experience, gives it more depth and more opportunity for, you know, for sponsors and for brands to raise money to help keep their experiences, you know, moving forwards.
Yeah, I think it's also about the target audience as well, Spencer. I mean, you know, trying to get to the younger generation is pretty hard for a lot of brands, and getting into esports is one way of doing that, but they need to be authentic, and the activation around it needs to be authentic. So there has to be, you know, I think gamers are very skeptical is one of the things we found. And, you know, you can't just go and badge something and expect to be accepted. You know, you've got to really integrate it well and do that properly. And I think when you do that properly, it really works. And I think it was DHL did it into one of the tournaments. And, you know, you've got a whole stadium of people chanting DHL. Now, DHL isn't really the brand that I would have thought about, that, you know, 20 somethings would be chanting, but you know, they really appreciated the support and what DHL were doing to enable their sport and to enable their game to be in that tournament and so on and so forth. And I think, you know, there's a massive opportunity, and you see, you know, car manufacturers and all sorts of brands now coming into gaming because they want to connect with that audience, and they want to connect with that audience in an authentic way.
Yeah, I think the product placement side of things, I can see now, you know, the Audis are suddenly appearing inside, you know, shoot 'em up games and stuff, and just like they do in certain documentaries and movies and films these days. And box sets. So yeah, so it's fascinating. Do you think that this is just an inevitable road now, where it just becomes more and more down this route, or do you think it's just, I guess the question is, when will we see this kind of experience being more mainstream? Do you think it's a 5-year thing, a 10-year thing, or do you think it is here now?
I think, I mean, it is here now, and I think it will only grow. So I think, you know, already if you look at the projections for the esports markets, you know, it is exploding, and I think it will just continue to do so, and it will become more mainstream. I would say relatively quickly. I mean, if you think about adoption of things, and you think about how quickly things get adopted now versus in the past, and I think, you know, people are just picking it up and running with it, and you know, it's growing exponentially.
Yeah, and so you see like a large amount of your revenues in the future coming, a larger amount of revenues coming from this area. Well, it's obviously
I mean, you know, I think
clients.
I think there's two things. I think the sponsorship side, certainly for esports, but also then the communication side as well. And you know, if particularly in the motorsport world, being able to actually put a proper communications campaign around an esports program is critical. And I think, you know, that's something that clearly we're well positioned to do, and have been doing, and will continue to do.
And then just lastly as well around there, and we talk about social media platforms, you know, the usual sort of, you know, the usual collection, but actually Discord and a few others are sort of creeping into from the more gaming perspective. And isn't that right? It's almost like they're a separate set of social platforms that are kind of game based in that area as well now.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Discord, Twitch, the gaming platforms. And it's interesting because I was talking to somebody the other day who is in a completely different business, but has got a platform based on Unreal Engine, which is a gaming development platform. And you know, they're most of their communication these days has been done on Discord as well. And it's like, okay, so that is really becoming, you know, the
version of, you know, for the comms and stuff.
Exactly.
It's so true. It's funny. I've seen the development of Unreal Engine and Unity as two, you know, technology platforms. And, you know, for us, you know, there was always kind of certain technologies that were sort of powering a lot of the digital changes, but those two platforms are very underrated, and they are powering a lot more of the virtual worlds, you know, the VR side of things, the augmented reality side of things. And I'm a big fan of both those platforms. I've got a couple of clients who work with them as well, which is, you know, I can see the growth in them, and it's nice to see again, a bit more diversity in the social media platforms as well, not just being the same collective bunch, but other people becoming more niche by certain sectors as well. So
yeah, absolutely.
On Twitch, didn't you? I think, did you do a campaign on Twitch last year or something? Or
so we ran an esports event. So SQN is partnered with an agency, esports agency called Init Esports, and we created an event with A-list female athletes. So Init's very much about gender equality, diversity, and inclusion. We created an event with A-list female athletes: Hope Solo, US American goalkeeper, Aerial Powers, NBA player, Oksana Masters, a Paralympian, and some others, and we put them into sim rigs to race with the NASCAR game. Some of them had obviously done esports before, but not really with sim racing. We created an event called Race Me, which was fantastic. I mean, they all had a ball, and streamed live on the Init Twitch channel.
Amazing, love that. That's great. Well, it's really good to hear those. I'm a big fan, as you know, of the now, next, and future of services, and there's a lot of things that are bread and butter that we all do, but I love that you're already looking at the next and the future, and you're already thinking about what's happening next, and you're already there for your clients, if they need to progress things further, you can do that, right? Because you've got experience in those areas ahead of the curve almost.
Yeah, and I absolutely on the virtual platform stuff, from a hospitality perspective, we're working with a US agency or a US partner who has come out of the same sort of background as we have, from a tech background with sponsorship, and she saw the need to have a virtual platform and has created this hospitality. Well, in fact, it's not just hospitality, it can be anything. So, she's got one client that sells super yachts in Russia, and they can't take people on super yacht tours anymore. So she's created a virtual environment for them to be able to go and sell their yachts. But, that whole experience of super reality, we've had great feedback. We're talking to a number of sporting championships about it as being an opportunity to provide hospitality. And the feedback we're getting is that it's way above anything else that's out there on the market right now. So we're really excited about that too.
Sounds amazing. Do you find that the Americans are slightly ahead of the adoption curve to compare with Europe and the rest of the world, or no, not really? Okay.
So I think we're fortunate that we've got some forward-thinking partners that have seen an opportunity and have got the connections in order to create something. I mean, they've created this platform from scratch since March last year. But I think the adoption for it, certainly from what I'm seeing in Europe, is probably more advanced than it is in the US right now.
That's amazing to see, amazing to hear. The reason I asked the question is that I think I've in some ways I've often seen stateside North America being largely ahead of the curve by a small period of time around technology adoption, but of course there are always a lot of people in America who are a long way behind as well. But it was actually just the post I did yesterday on LinkedIn around the Amazon, the new Amazon Fresh store that's opened up, where basically the checkoutless store, right? So you go in and you can buy your products, and it's using the technology that they use actually, and thinking the radar stuff in the cars for the autopilot and stuff. So it's recognizing products going into your basket, but actually, that's not new, right? It's been in America now for about 3 years.
Yeah.
And I guess when I saw it go, the first store open in London yesterday, I felt a little bit sad about the UK, because I believe we've got the innovation here. And I just can't believe that we've had to wait 3 years for an American retailer to open it up in our country, and we couldn't have done that first. I mean, I know we have sort of cut down versions of Tesco's and Waitrose, but it's interesting to hear that you're saying that Europe is actually leading the way in the adoption of these areas, and I think that's really good to hear. And I think actually we need to get more of that happening, across the UK and Europe, to make sure that our adoption isn't always one step behind, and that actually we've got the abilities to lead on these things. So we should do that.
Absolutely. And I think you are right, Spencer. I think you've got some parts of the US which are very advanced. I mean, Silicon Valley and so on and so forth are thinking about new developments and things all the time. But in terms of a lot of things in the US are actually quite a long way behind as well. So I think certainly what I'm seeing from a sporting adoption perspective, I think, and maybe it's because I don't have enough visibility on what's going on in the US, but I think that some of the things I'm seeing here, I'm not seeing being done there, and the adoption is not as fast out there. I think people are much slower.
Good. So that's been, I can't believe an hour has passed already.
I know, me neither.
We've talked loads. I've really enjoyed it. It's been the first time I've got to speak to someone about sponsorship. I love everything about that area. I think there's good lessons there, not only to hear your own personal story on how you've been involved with it and how you the benefits of activation, etc., but also us being able to relate it to agency journeys as well. And I think that's really important for everyone listening. The fact that you've got this kind of, you are already adopting next and future services, and you're adding, already looking at how you can do sponsorship within ABM, which I've heard a lot of people talk about ABM, but not ABM and sponsorship together as a combination. So it's great to hear that. And so thank you for your time today. It's been really, really interesting.
Really enjoyed it.
And I wish you all the best. And hopefully I wish you all the best with the opening up of all the live sports events, and hopefully watch with some fascination to see what changes happen in that space. Hopefully some new innovations and new approaches. So
yeah, absolutely.
And there's a bit of a thing about our vodcasts here at Agencyphonics, which is whenever someone has a window nearby, every now and then we get these rays of light that come across you. It sort of looks like divine intervention. So now, so it doesn't matter. And those of you listening on audio don't know what we're talking about, so don't worry. So listen, thank you everyone for listening today. Hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll put all of Claire's details into the show notes. If you're working in sports or working in sponsorship, please reach out to her and say hello. I'm sure she'd welcome any contact. And you can join us again later on, if those of you listening live, to another episode this afternoon, 2 in one day. I must be mad trying to do 2 shows in one day, but that's the way it is. So thanks, enjoy. And that is a wrap.